Welcome back to the Humble Market Timer YouTube channel. Once again, if you enjoyed the content, please like, comment, and subscribe. In today's video, we're going to look at Bitcoin and what I believe are the 3 different indicators that you need to look for to let you know that the bull run is still on. Before I go any further, here's my disclaimer. Once again, these are my sole ideas, not investment advice. Now, Bitcoin and all of crypto have been getting hammered for the most part in the last month. Altcoins have many of them have been wrecked. Bitcoin is hanging in there, but it's taken a lot of body blows and it's been wounded. But there's some things that I think that we really need to look for to really determine the direction that Bitcoin is headed in the next month, 2 months, or maybe 3 months. A lot of FUD out there, fear, uncertainty, doubt. A lot of liquidations have occurred, but oftentimes those things foreshadow massive runs, or they're precursors to massive runs. Let's look at the first thing I think you need to look at to ensure that Bitcoin still has life and this bull run is not yet over. In the last video I did, I talked a lot about how Bitcoin, it does not historically make its massive surges higher until it kisses the 50-week moving average. And we have kind of been waffling around and getting close to that level, but not really hitting it. But we finally hit it on yesterday, where Bitcoin went below $100,000 briefly. We've had a little bit of a recovery, and right now we are sitting right at the 50-week moving average, which is just under $103,000. And as I pointed in the other video I did, which you need to look at for more details, we always tend to get multiple tests at that 50-week moving average before we get surges. Here, multiple tests here, multiple tests here, surge. Multiple tests here, multiple tests here, surge. Historically, it has to kiss that 50-week moving average before it does any moves higher. We finally got that. We slightly got it in that initial liquidation in mid-October, but we actually finally hit and dipped slightly below that 50-week moving average, and we have recently recovered to being right at that average. What we want to see, and what will prove to you, or partially prove to you, that there's still life in the bull run, is we have to hold that 50-week moving average. We may get another test where we may get another push below the 50-week moving average, but we have to hold support in that area, bounce, and get back over that 103 area. The very first thing we need to have on the menu as far as what we need to see to ensure the Bitcoin and crypto run is not yet over. Second thing we need to look for, I think we need to see a death cross. Now, death crosses tend to have a very negative connotation. It sounds really bad, but in actuality, I think you need to see death crosses in order to get that surge. And let me give you a little idea of what I mean. Death cross is when the 50-day moving average crosses the 200-day moving average. And kind of here's an example of a death cross where you have the brighter line here is the 50-day and the lighter line is the 200-day. And you have these circles here that show you where you have the cross. Now, the thing about death crosses, they're typically lagging indicators. So once you have the death cross, a lot of times that tends to point out a bottom, and you get massive surges out of that death cross. You can see here we had a death cross in this example here, and as you can see, that occurred right near the bottom, and then look at the move out of the death cross. So that is often what you see in death crosses. Now looking at Bitcoin, here's a chart of the daily chart, and you can see we had a death cross here. Once the 50 crossed the 200, look at the surge afterwards. We had a cross here, had a dip, consolidated for a little while, but then look at the surge. Had a cross here, look at the dip, right at the lower portion, and then we had a surge. And as you can see here, kind of close, kind of tight. It might be a little hard to see, but we're approaching another death cross. So I personally think that if we do get a death cross, that could be a positive, and it could mark a bottom. And at that point, you'll see another massive surge in Bitcoin. So we need to see that 50-week moving average hold. I think we need to see the death cross occur to get that major push up out of the death cross. And then the third thing I think you need to see is looking back at another weekly chart of Bitcoin. I want you to pay not as much attention to the price action here, but I want you to pay attention to this RSI. And I want you to see how the RSI has traded in parallels in the past. And in this current move that we have, I think the parallels are pretty clear. You have certain outliers outside of the parallel, but I think the actual price movement within the parallel is pretty consistent. But I think there are two things that you need to look at. You have a parallel that is trending in this direction. You see this parallel going in this direction. That implies a movement up in Bitcoin. But at the same time, you also see this parallel, which is moving down, which implies a decrease in the price in Bitcoin. So you're trying to determine if we're moving up or if we're moving down. And so you have two conflicting parallels where you're not sure whether it's really moving up or really moving down when you're looking at it from a larger scope. But I want you to look at where these two cross. You have the parallel moving up and the parallel moving down. Look at where we have been moving and staying inside of those two parallels. You can see that where those parallels intersect and cross, you can see we're at the bottom of the uptrending parallel. We've recently hit that in the past day or two. So what I think you want to look for is if we hold this lower region of this uptrending portion of the RSI, I think we can get a surge back to the upper portion of this parallel. First test will be the upper portion of the downtrending parallel, which should be here. And then if that breaks, that puts us back to the upper portion of this parallel. And that would mean you're possibly going to get a big bounce off this lower portion of this parallel to go back to this, and that is when you get the big move in Bitcoin. So you want to look at the RSI to see if this downtrending parallel to see if we are going to hold the lower portion of this uptrending parallel right here. If it doesn't hold, we're going to fall down more than likely to the lower portion of this downtrending parallel, and we will have a pretty big collapse in the price. Historically, Bitcoin typically makes big bounces when it hits 30-ish on the weekly RSI. You see here, we dropped here. That's when you had your bounce. If we fall out of this parallel here and we fall more along the lines of this downtrending parallel, we are more than likely going to go to that 30-ish RSI level. Now, at that point, Bitcoin will be a great buy again, but you will see quite a bit of downside if that occurs. So be on the lookout for if that 50-week moving average holds. Again, we may have another test of it, but it has to hold. If it does hold, you tend to get a big move. I think you need to look for that death cross that's going to occur, or that we're in the process of possibly occurring, when the 50-day crosses the 200-day. And then the final thing, look to see if we're trading more along the lines, as far as RSI, of the uptrending parallel or the downtrending parallel. If we're trading in that uptrending parallel and this area holds, we will get that big bounce in Bitcoin and crypto. Hope you like the content. If you like it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.